All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast today. Today is a very timely topic. In fact, just this morning, I was listening on NPR and it was talking about the Great Resignation. So it is on the top of all of the news broadcasts. And, what we do here at DoControl is, I think, very closely aligned to this because as people start leaving, they're also leaving behind access, shared access, and it just creates security risks that we think that a lot of people are having to deal with. So we're going to talk about that over the next half hour, 45 minutes. And we have Corey, who is our new Director of Product Marketing. He's awesome. He came here from CyberArk, and we are thrilled to have him as his first webinar. So everybody give him a huge round of applause. I heard that. But seriously, though, if you want to either applause or ask questions, you can press the question mark button on the right side of your Bright Talk panel, and we will get to those questions likely through the end. If it's something urgent, we'll be checking it throughout. Otherwise, take it away. And we are recording this, and this will be sent out soon after. Right.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Sam. Again, my name is Corey O'Connor, Director of Product Marketing here at DoControl. And as Sam mentioned, I think we've got a very interesting, very timely topic on the Great Resignation and what that really means from a insider threat and third-party risk perspective. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the agenda for today. First, we're going to obviously cover the Great Resignation and the risks associated. We're going to focus a lot on the third-party risk that's introduced. We will cover, as Sam mentioned, employee departures. That's a critical piece as well. Then we're going to pivot and talk about SaaS trends and observations and in the context of the Great Resignation and how those things are correlated. Obviously, we'll do an overview of the DoControl platform, solution demonstration, and of course, we've saved some time for a Q&A. Before we get into it, though, who is DoControl and what do we do? So DoControl was established back in June of 2020. We're based in Tel Aviv in Israel. Our US headquarters, or kind of our go-to-market location, is based in New York City. And we focus on helping organizations prevent data breaches across the most popular SaaS applications. And what we try to do is strive to find the perfect balance between security and business enablement. What we do is we provide security teams with the automated self-service tools that they need for data access monitoring, orchestration, and remediation within these SaaS applications that they're leveraging to drive their business. Some of our investors were backed by RTP Global, Stage One Ventures, Cardamom Capital, and the global cybersecurity leader CrowdStrike. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this company, leading EDR solution provider. They're an investor as well. They have an early stage investment fund called the CrowdStrike Falcon Fund. So CrowdStrike is both an investor as well as a technology alliance partner. So this is obviously a very high level overview of what we do here at DoControl. Obviously, when we get to the solution demonstration, we'll show you a bit more and provide a bit more detail into how we're solving these problems for our customers. So let's now go ahead and talk about the Great Resignation. So this is a recent statistic that came out from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics back in September. 4.5 million Americans quit their jobs. So this is obviously surprising. I mean, the economy seems to be doing really well. Whatever the reason and the cause might be, it doesn't matter. You can speculate that maybe the pandemic had some influence in people deciding to leave the workforce. Really doesn't matter why. The issue is the fact that it's taking place. And in line with those resignations is the number of open opportunities that existed before, these employees decided to leave. And now organizations are having to replace those, create a replacement requisition to backfill those openings. So organizations are left with a pretty big gap in terms of employment resources. No industry vertical is safe, but one of the trends that we're seeing is it's affecting both the technology and healthcare sector more than some of the other verticals. And then lastly, I think one of the more interesting data points in regards to the Great Resignation is the age demographic that's most impacted. It's between the ages of 30 and 45 years old. So that's the number, or that's the age group that has seen the biggest increase in resignation rates. And it's probably a little biased because I fit within that age demographic, but I do feel that this cluster of employees are critical to most companies. These people are pretty well seasoned. They're not super green, fresh out of college. They're also not 1 foot out of the door, getting ready for retirement. These are the people that are helping move the business forward, and they're leaving the workforce at an alarming rate, right? So, and the challenge there, as Sam mentioned at the top of the call, when it is a standard practice for employee departures to take files and sensitive company data with them. It's not always the intent is not always malicious, but the reality is, I'm sure everyone is guilty of it at some point when they leave a company. They want to take some files that they've maybe worked on, or some group projects that would be valuable for their next move, right? So there's an increased risk of employee departures and that insider threat aspect that we talked about. So there's risk there, and it's certainly been elevated with the Great Resignation. I mean, again, when employees leave, this is a standard practice, but it certainly becomes escalated when there's a huge influx of people leaving the workforce. So what does that mean from a third-party perspective? So the third-party risk needs to be prioritized. I think it's pretty well understood that in dealing with third parties and opening up your systems and applications to a third-party vendor inherently is introducing risk. You're widening the attack vector by bringing those vendors into your company. This is a statistic from Ponemon, and it's a little bit outdated, but I think it's still a very important statistic. The average company works with 583 third-party vendors. Again, this is a few years old now. I would expect that this number would be higher, especially given the context of the Great Resignation. Within the past 2 years, 53% of organizations have experienced at least one data breach that's caused by a third party, which cost an average of $7.5 million to remediate. Again, there's been a number of supply chain-based attacks. I think people understand that there is risk with third-party vendors, and there's a vetting process. Companies will do their due diligence in vetting out the third-party vendors that they want to bring in. But the reality is each vendor has a different idea of what a strong security posture is. Their security programs differ dramatically. The tools and technologies and processes that they have in place are all going to be different. Most times it's going to be tied to the size of the vendor. If they're a smaller organization, they might have a less strong security program. So it's just introducing more risk as the reliance in third-party vendors becomes higher and higher. As the number of resignations increase, it's natural for an organization to look to third parties. That is probably the quickest and easiest way in the short term to fill the void, right? For the work that can't be done through the lack of employment resources that you have, you look to a third party to help support you. And it's not, again, it's also not in any way tied to the size of the company. If you're a startup, if you're a smaller company, or a well-established enterprise organization, most times you're using some number of a mix of different vendors for different business functions as well. So some of the negative outcomes associated with working with third-party vendors, and to be honest, most of what's listed here is really also tied to a major breach, right? Financial and reputational impact. This is, future loss of potential revenue. If you're a publicly traded company, there might be, negative implications to the stock price. From a legal and regulatory compliance standpoint, if you're found to be, in non-compliance with a regulation, and there might be some fines that you have to pay. And then operational downtime, loss of productivity. Again, these are all things that are standard with a cyber breach, but also even more so escalated as the reliance of third parties becomes higher and higher. SaaS trends and observations. So again, more statistics here, kind of a stats nerd. This comes from a McKinsey report. So the analysts estimate that the SaaS market will grow more than 20% annually, reaching nearly 200 billion by 2024, a level that would represent nearly 1/3 of all of the overall enterprise software market. So look, I think if you're doing business today, you're probably using SaaS applications. I'm not going to highlight the benefits of using SaaS apps. I think everyone understands the value that they deliver, which is why they're readily adopted. And I think anytime you look at an application or a tool or a technology that helps drive the business, you have to consider the implications from a security perspective. I think organizations oftentimes will rush to introduce, again, new tools and technologies that drive the business forward, but you can't let security be an afterthought or an oversight. And what does this mean for third parties? Again, it's standard best practice here to provide access to those systems or those SaaS applications, more specifically, with those third parties for project collaboration. You might be outsourcing jobs to them entirely. So you have to provide access to certain applications. So, therein lies the risk. Again, to kind of recap the introduction piece here, you have a influx of employees that are leaving the workforce. There's the threat of the insider taking sensitive company data with them. There's, more of a reliance on third-party vendors to help satisfy, that gap. But in bringing in those third-party vendors, you're adding even more risk. So it just gets compounded. And then again, SaaS application adoption has increased more and more over time. And providing access to these applications are really necessary to the third parties to be able to do business. So again, some good considerations here. When we look at the current state is really tied to zero trust. This is a concept that's been around for quite some time. It's even more so been adopted in recent times. You have companies like Google creating Beyond Corp and making this concept more practical. And you now have NIST, who created a zero trust reference architecture that most organizations are trying to align to and build their security programs around. So this is something that is being adopted by most companies. And another thing that is not a super new concept, but certainly relevant, is identity being the new perimeter. When you look at how business was done traditionally, everything was kind of done within the confines of the corporate location. Look at how the pandemic has changed the way in which businesses have to do work, right? There's remote work, there's hybrid, working environments. Organizations have had to change, and even more so during the pandemic. They certainly, greased the tracks on their zero trust security strategies and executing on them. So the logical place to start is at the identity level, right? Identity is the new perimeter. So you start with your Okta, your Google Workspace, OneLogin, Azure AD. Each identity within an organization has different levels of permissions, entitlements, and access. right? And it's all tied back to their job function. So you have to provision the appropriate amount of access for those identities to be effective in their job, right? So this is kind of a least privilege piece where you want to give just the right amount of access so they can be effective, but you're not giving them too much access where you're introducing additional risk. So the first pillar that we're looking at here is the identity piece. If we look to the right of that, we have the zero trust network access component. So this is Beyond Corp Enterprise, Duo, and other technology vendors that are looking to secure or provide a secure access, broker a secure connection with those identities from whatever devices that they're accessing, the corporate network and drives with. And again, creating that secure pathway for those identities to then make it into, the application estate. And that's where you're in, right? So once you make it through these two pillars, which are critical pillars, you essentially have unfettered access to some of these different applications. There's no consistent controls around the application access layer. And when you look at SaaS applications, they all have some native security features, functionality built into the app that mitigates the risk of, oversharing, overexposure, general security capabilities that are going to, lower your risk. But the challenge is they're all different, and most companies have a number of different applications that they're leveraging. So trying to enforce consistent policies across all the different applications that are being utilized is not feasible. It takes time, it takes resources. Again, the controls are inconsistent, and that's the opportunity that we have at DoControl. I mean, that's what we're trying to solve for, is to secure that unmanageable access across all of the different personas that you can see on the slide here, your temporary employees, third-party vendors, contractors, your former vendors, your former employees, private accounts. We'll show some use cases on this in the demonstration later. But this is really the current kind of ecosystem or architecture at the highest level, and the gap that most organizations have. So DoControl, we provide zero trust data access controls, right? When you look at the three pillars within zero trust, you have continuous monitoring. If you truly can't trust any of the identities in your environment, and you anticipate that somebody that's in here is a malicious actor, then you have to continually monitor the environment. You have to continually monitor the events that are taking place and identify indicators of compromise and things that present higher levels of risk to the organization. So you have to monitor the activities that are taking place within the IT estate. The second piece is least privilege. We talked about that on the slide prior. So giving the appropriate level of access for people to be effective in their job, but not over provisioning or again, giving them access to systems and applications that they really don't need access to. And then the third piece is automation. You have to have some automation built in if you truly want to align to a zero trust architecture. It's the modern business demands automation on some level. You can't do it otherwise. So from a DoControl perspective, this is how the platform works. So what we do is we use SaaS apps as metadata sources. The platform is completely event driven, and it's done via webhooks and APIs. And what we're doing is we're aggregating all of the events that are taking place across all the different, dev tools, project management tools, ITSM, CRM, collaborative tools. We're taking all of those events and we're aggregating them. We don't sit in the data plane or the data path. Again, it's all done via APIs. And then what we're doing is we're taking that contextual data and adding value to the likely security investments you've already made, right? Your IDP, your HR systems, your SIM, your SOAR, your EDR solutions. And when we look back at the three principles of zero trust, from a data access standpoint, we're continually monitoring all of the events across the SaaS application estate. So we've got a finger on the pulse over all the identities, whether they're internal, whether they're external collaborators, whichever applications are being leveraged that are helping to drive the business. We have the ability to monitor that activity and provide visibility into all of the assets and identities that you're having to manage. From a least privilege perspective, you can apply least privilege at the identity level, but as we had shown on the slide prior, once they get in, they have access to these different applications. And how do you provide least privilege beyond the identity level? We're going to show you in the use case demonstration. So you can apply specific controls around, how long a certain third party has access to specific applications and files. So you're adding more granular least privilege functionality beyond the identity level and applying it to the SaaS application layer. And then the last piece, again, is automation. Obviously, we're a modern, SaaS security company. We have a lot of automation built into the platform. We help drive operational efficiency inherently just through the policies that we can help you enforce, right? You're going to free up time for your IT and security teams by creating policy to enforce consistency across all of the applications instead of doing it manually. It's tedious. Like, as I mentioned before, it's not feasible and it's not a good use of time and resources. So we've automated a lot of the core components within the platform. And then we've also enabled manual intervention where it's appropriate. I think the security teams would argue that not everything needs to be automated. There needs to be some manual process. And again, we'll show you when we get to the solution demonstration a bit more of that, which is a good segue into the next slide. So let's go ahead. And we're going to log into the DoControl service, the console here, right? So first and foremost, I want to focus on 3 specific use cases. So we're going to create some policies, but I just want to cover a couple of quick things here in the console. So the first one is the inventory. So we just talked about this. Having visibility across the entire estate is important, and both from a user perspective and an asset perspective. So if we click on the user tab, you have visibility into all the internal users, the members of groups, the external collaborators. Again, this is just high level detail of each individual user, the applications that they have access to, and other details. And then you can filter. You can add filters to filter for specific events or for specific identities. But here I wanted to talk quickly about some of the manual intervention that you can do. So under the Assets tab, you can, again, we're basically presented with a high-level overview of all the different assets, right, across all the applications that are within DoControl's management platform. And if, let's say that this is a Google, a personal drive, right, like this example here. If there's a personal drive that's providing external access to a certain document that should not be shared, you can take immediate action and you can change the owner, you can remove public sharing. If it's a specific file that should not be shared, you can actually delete the file as well. So here, again, we've created the ability to take immediate action upon any high risk event that might be taking place. But the point I'm trying to make here is the visibility that you now have across all the different users, entities, inside the company, outside the company, all of the assets that are, again, under the management of the DoControl platform, all the different applications you can see up here. And here you can filter down as well if you want to get more granular on each specific application. So that's the inventory, right? So this is providing visibility into the entire SaaS application estate. Onboarding applications is easy. You can do it in a few quick, simple steps. We're not going to cover that in this demo, but let's do a couple of use cases. So the first one is going back to the insider threat of an employee leaving the company, right? So when you think of the Great Resignation and the number of employees that are leaving, and the fact that the majority of them at some point are taking sensitive files with them prior to their departure, you can create a policy that will block the sharing of specific application data to private accounts, right? So this is pretty straightforward in terms of defining a policy. So here you put in the appropriate details. We're going to call this employee number 1, departure. Policy description, this employee had access to, privileged data sets, and, we want to revoke or let's see, we want to block the sharing of sensitive. Yeah, this is obviously just an example, but you're going to define the policy. You're going to create a description. Here you're going to, this is again connected to Bamboo HR, right? The HR application. And then here, who are we going to include within this target condition? So we're going to include all the different private accounts that we know exist for this employee, right? You can see all the different personal email accounts that we have on file, any additional emails that we want to select or include, I should say. Then we scroll down to the affected applications. You can include all the applications. You can select which applications specifically that we want to block access in terms of sharing data. And then you define the workflow. This is very straightforward and it's very simple, right? I'll just quickly review the different steps. You can drag and drop each of these different action items. You can obviously wait to enforce the policy. You have the ability to create notifications through email and notify the individual actor, right? So if it's something, not in this case, because we're talking about employees that are leaving the business, but if, let's say that the example is sharing, working collaboratively with a third party on a project, and the internal employee, you want to check in and see if they should still be providing access to specific files or applications, you can notify the individual. That way you don't have to notify, the IT security team. You can obviously predetermine or predefine the workflow to notify the appropriate personas. And if it's something that's obviously a higher level of risk, then you notify, the IT, the security team, whoever the appropriate personas would be. You can also create a webhook that feeds into a solution like Rapid7 or your SIM tool. And we'll show this in a later use case example. You can send out a Slack notification to a Slack channel, right? And what we'll do in the other example is we have a specific Slack channel for SaaS security incidents. So once this we activate this policy, and if that employee tried to share a Google Drive or files, then the notification gets fed into Slack. Obviously, we're going to block that activity and then notify the appropriate team. So again, it's very simple, very easy. You create a few fill in a couple of fields, create the workflow, and then you activate the policy and you're off and running. So the next use case is, let's say that, again, third parties is the second piece here. You can set like an auto expiration policy. So let's say that we actually have a legitimate business use case here where let's say that we're working with third party X on finance review. The description, again, just put the details. Let's just say that, I don't know, reviewing confidential financial reports. And then here, again, we're going to select the appropriate groups, right? So let's say it's finance and legal. And then below, you would include in the target condition the appropriate third parties that, again, you want to include in the policy. Here you select the applications that you're providing access to. And then similarly to what we just discussed, you define the workflow. right? So what happens after, let's say that this is going to be a 3-month project, you can essentially create a predetermined time frame to revoke access to those applications. So once that time frame hits, once you hit that timestamp, it's going to automatically pull the access. And before it does, again, we talked about this as well, you can notify the appropriate personas. So this is enforcing least privilege specifically on the application level, right? So you're providing access to certain users so they can do their job effectively, but after they no longer need that access, it's removed. This is the issue that organizations are challenged with, is especially from a third-party perspective, you're sharing files and you don't have really good insight as to who else can see those files once they are in the hands of the third party, which brings us to the next use case. So we actually have a policy defined here, which is preventing the sharing of access to Google Drive to fourth parties, right? So we've already created the steps. Here's the affected applications. Here's the workflow. So let's say in this example, I, Corey O'Connor at DoControl, I have this customer database, right? This is a fake database. So let's say that Corey O'Connor at DoControl wants to provide access to, this is my own personal email, right? To Corey O'Connor. We give him access, and let me just pull up the other tab here. So here's Corey O'Connor, the third party, right? So this is the approved third party that has access to this file. Excuse me. Let's say that Corey O'Connor, the third party who's approved, wants to share access to a fourth party, right? And we're going to create a fourth party alias here. So we're gonna provide access to this fourth party, not within the organization share anyway. And then I mentioned earlier the Slack notification. So we predefined a policy that disallowed the sharing of Google Drive files to fourth parties, right? Now what you can see is you can see the policy in action, right? You can see who the individual was. This was Corey O'Connor at Gmail, and the target was this fourth party, right? You can see the asset that was shared, and you can see that the event was blocked, and you can pull up additional details and see, again, the workflow here. We can see the fact that the notification was sent to that specific Slack channel, SaaS security incidences, and we effectively enforced it, right? So we blocked the access. And then you can see, if we scroll down to the events tab, you'll see all of that detail there. So yeah, those are 3 practical use cases that that are, again, connected to the Great Resignation, right? When you consider the number of employees that are leaving and introducing risk to organizations, as well as the reliance on bringing in third parties to help satisfy those gaps, it's certainly an additional layer of risk that needs to be considered and it needs to be managed. So, a recap, the DoControl solution. So we provide a single security strategy that centralizes the enforcement of least privilege beyond the identity, network, and device levels throughout an organization's entire estate of SaaS applications. And hopefully we showed this in the demo. Again, strong visibility across all of the SaaS applications that are being utilized. So you've got a single view of all the different identities, whether they're internal or external collaborators, the different applications and files that exist and that DoControl is managing. Continuous monitoring, we already talked about this, right? This is a core component to Zero Trust, and it's a core area that we satisfy from the SaaS application level. I think the strongest feature that we have goes back to the policy enforcement, right? The ability to enforce policy across all of these disparate SaaS applications that have built-in functionality and vary dramatically, and we enable IT and security teams to do it in a single, from a single point of reference. Key benefits: improved security posture. Obviously, we're a SaaS security company. Our aim is to mitigate the risk of data exfiltration and a major breach, right? So we're bolstering your security. I mentioned before, we're adding value to the existing investments that you've made. So an investment in DoControl is not only reducing risk at the SaaS application level, but it's also adding value to the investments that you've already made. Operational efficiency. This kind of goes back to the centralized policy enforcement piece. With DoControl, we're allowing your IT security teams to focus on things that are more valuable to the business, right? You don't have to create policy specific to each application and try to manage third-party vendor access across all the different applications. It's not a good use of time or resources. So operational efficiencies is something we strive to build into the product. And then lastly, compliance support. So data access controls are a critical component to a number of different frameworks and policies and standards out there. And we help organizations avoid non-compliance with regulations, as well as, support internal policy. A lot of our customers have policy that dictates controls and security around SaaS apps. And then call to action. So obviously request a demo if you want to see a customized solution demonstration that's catered to your business and the applications that you're using. Visit our website, docontrol.io/demo, and request a demo today. You'll meet with our team. We'll have a discovery call, identify, what your challenges are. We'll do a demo, and then, we can do a further engagement that involves a risk assessment that will scan your SaaS applications, the environment to, again, quantify your risk, identify high-risk users. What we're going to do is leave you with remediation strategies that reduce risk immediately, and then, are future-proofed and reduce risk over time. Excuse me. Visit our website. We also have a new insider threat white paper that we published. So if you go to the resources section of our website, we talk about some of these things in further detail that we covered today. And with that, I think we can go to the Q&A. So Sam,
awesome.
Over to you.
Great. It's fantastic. Perfect timing too. So just see here, go to questions. So just click on that question mark. I see we've already got a couple in here. So which applications are supported by DoControl?
Sure. So we support most of the most popular applications that modern companies are using today. File sharing apps like Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, different communication tools like Teams and Slack, GitHub, Bitbucket, again, for EDR, CrowdStrike is an integration. So it's really, we have a long list of apps that we support. Obviously, we're a newer company, so that list will only grow as our business grows and as we, have customer demand for more applications. But we certainly started out with the applications that the average business is using on a daily basis. So,
good. So next question here, is the solution agent-based or agentless?
Yeah, so it's there's no agents involved, right? I kind of covered this when we did the platform overview. So everything is done. It's a completely event-driven platform. It's all via webhooks and APIs. So there's no agents that need to be installed. We're not going to get into the data path in any sort of way. We're just ingesting the metadata sources from each application, feeding that into our own platform. So yeah, no agents, completely agentless solution.
Okay. Last question here that I see in here. Can you set up real-time alerts?
You can. Again, because it's event driven, you can customize, the alerts. I also showed in the demo the integration that we have with a SIM solution, and over time there's a risk categorization or risk index, for lack of a better description, for each of the events. So we do obviously support alerting. And it is customizable as well. So,
okay, fantastic. Our next webinar is January 12th at 12 p.m., where you will see an encore presentation. Corey will be joined by Lewis Miller, one of our senior solutions architects, and we'll be talking about zero trust data access, hot topic as well. So happy New Year, happy holidays, and thanks for joining. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Corey. That was awesome.
thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.